They sent soldiers. They sent trackers. They sent entire battalions across deserts, mountains, and hostile territory. And still, one man refused to be captured, refused to submit, and refused to disappear. Geronimo did not just resist the United States Army. He embarrassed it, outlasted it, and forced the most powerful nation in the West into one of the longest and most expensive manhunts in American history. Long before his name became feared, Geronimo was simply a member of the Chiricahua Apache, born into a world shaped by survival, honor, and unforgiving land. The desert was not a barrier to him, it was home. The mountains were not obstacles, they were protection. From a young age, he learned to endure hunger, track enemies, read terrain, and move silently through environments where outsiders could not survive for long. Geronimo was not born an outlaw. He was created by violence. When his family was brutally killed during raids by Mexican forces, something inside him hardened. What might have broken others became the foundation of his resistance. This was no longer about territory or pride. It became personal. Every raid, every escape, every counterattack carried the weight of loss, memory, and refusal to surrender to those who had taken everything from him. As American expansion pushed westward, Apache land shrank. Promises were broken. Treaties were ignored. Reservations became cages. Many tribes tried to adapt, negotiate, or survive quietly. Geronimo chose a different path. He fought, refused to accept a future decided by outsiders. The U.S. Army labeled him dangerous. Newspapers called him savage. Settlers feared his name. But behind the propaganda was a far more complex truth. Geronimo was a strategist, a survival expert, and a leader who understood terrain, timing, and psychological warfare better than most military commanders sent to capture him. He moved in small mobile groups that left almost no trace. He crossed borders with ease. He disappeared into landscapes where entire military units struggled to follow. Soldiers would pursue him for weeks, only to realize he had vanished, not because he was lucky, but because he understood the land better than they ever could. His escapes became legendary. Time after time he was reported captured, and time after time he broke free. Each escape humiliated the authorities further. Each pursuit cost more money, more manpower, and more pride. Geronimo became more than a fugitive. He became a symbol of resistance that the United States could not easily erase. That terrified them. If one man could defy an empire, what message did that send? If Geronimo could survive against overwhelming odds, what did that say about the limits of American control? The West was built on expansion, dominance, and the belief that no force could stand in the way of progress. But Geronimo stood in that path, not as a criminal chasing chaos, but as a man defending his right to exist freely. As newspapers exaggerated his actions, the myth grew. Some stories painted him as unstoppable. Others portrayed him as monstrous. But the reality was more dangerous than either version. He was disciplined, calculated, and driven by a purpose that made him nearly impossible to break. He did not seek fame. He did not seek conquest. He sought survival, justice, and freedom on his own terms. And as the American government poured more resources into hunting him down, one truth became impossible to ignore. They were no longer just chasing a man. They were fighting a symbol of defiance, a symbol that refused to die. If you're enjoying this true story of resistance and survival, take a second to support the channel. Leave a like, subscribe, and stay with us for more powerful stories from the real Wild West. As Geronimo's defiance continued, the United States Army realized they were no longer dealing with a simple group of fugitives. They were facing an enemy who understood terrain, timing, and psychological warfare better than many trained military officers. Every pursuit became a test of endurance, discipline, and pride, and too often Geronimo was the one who outlasted them. The American government poured massive resources into tracking him. Hundreds of soldiers were deployed. Scouts, trackers, and local allies were recruited. Entire operations were designed around one mission: capture Geronimo at all costs. And yet, again and again, he slipped through their grasp, leaving behind frustration, embarrassment, and unanswered questions. Geronimo's strength was not in numbers. His groups were often small, sometimes fewer than 50 people, including women and children. But what they lacked in size, they made up for in mobility, knowledge, and resilience. They moved quickly, avoided large confrontations, and chose terrain that gave them an advantage. When pursued, they vanished into mountains, deserts, and remote valleys where most soldiers could not survive long. While the army relied on supply lines, wagons, and structured operations, Geronimo relied on instinct, memory, and adaptability. He could travel light, live off the land, and endure extreme conditions with minimal resources. Soldiers often found themselves exhausted, dehydrated, and demoralized long before they ever came close to him. The psychological impact of Geronimo's resistance was enormous. His name spread through military ranks as a warning. Officers feared being assigned to his pursuit. Newspapers amplified his legend, sometimes exaggerating his power, but always reinforcing one idea: the United States could not easily defeat him. Settlers feared his raids. Politicians demanded results. Military commanders felt the pressure of public expectation, and every failed capture made the situation more humiliating. Geronimo, meanwhile, was not fighting for conquest. He was fighting to remain free. Reservations represented control, confinement, and loss of identity. For Geronimo, surrender meant more than laying down arms. It meant surrendering autonomy, culture, and the ability to live according to his people's traditions. To him, freedom in harsh terrain was preferable to comfort under someone else's authority. This belief drove him through exhaustion, hunger, and constant danger. At times, Geronimo did agree to surrender, but each agreement came with broken promises. Conditions worsened. Restrictions increased. Supplies were limited. Mistreatment followed. And each betrayal reinforced his conviction that escape was the only path to survival. Every time he fled again, his legend grew. Soldiers began describing him as if he were more than human. A ghost, a phantom, a shadow that could not be tracked. Some believed he had supernatural protection. Others believed he possessed unmatched survival skills. The truth was simpler and more impressive. He understood his world more deeply than those trying to conquer it. While American commanders debated strategies, Geronimo adapted in real time. He anticipated ambushes. He avoided predictable routes. He learned to read enemy behavior. In many ways, he was fighting not just with weapons, but with intelligence and patience. But the longer the manhunt continued, the more desperate the American response became. New tactics were introduced. More troops were deployed. Borders were crossed. International pressure mounted as Geronimo moved between the United States and Mexico, exploiting political and geographic boundaries that complicated his capture. What began as a pursuit turned into a national obsession. The idea that one man could evade an empire challenged the narrative of American dominance. The government could not afford to appear powerless. Capturing Geronimo became a matter of pride, reputation, and authority. Yet even as pressure increased, Geronimo continued to endure. He led his people through hunger, guided them through exhaustion. He made decisions that balanced survival with resistance. And as the years passed, the question was no longer whether the United States would eventually catch him. The real question became how much it would cost them to finally succeed. Because Geronimo was not just running anymore. He was testing the limits of an empire. At the height of the manhunt, Geronimo was no longer viewed as just a resisting tribal leader. He had become a national fixation. The United States Army deployed thousands of troops, not to fight an army, but to capture a single man and the small group that followed him. At times, nearly a quarter of the entire U.S. military was involved in tracking Geronimo across the Southwest, turning his pursuit into one of the most expensive and exhausting operations in American frontier history. This was not just about law enforcement anymore. It was about pride. It was about authority. It was about proving that no one, not even a man like Geronimo, could stand against American expansion. Military commanders grew increasingly frustrated. Weeks of pursuit would end with nothing but fading tracks. Scouts would believe they were close, only to discover Geronimo had doubled back, changed routes, or vanished into terrain that looked impossible to cross. Mountains, deserts, ravines, and hostile environments became his allies, while soldiers struggled under heat, fatigue, and dwindling morale. Geronimo's survival strategy relied on movement and unpredictability. He avoided large-scale battles. Instead, he focused on mobility, retreat, and calculated strikes when necessary. Every encounter with the army was chosen carefully, not for glory, but for survival. He understood that staying alive mattered more than winning a single fight. While American officers relied on rigid planning, Geronimo relied on instinct and experience. He anticipated enemy movements. He used false trails. He exploited overconfidence. In some cases, soldiers realized too late that they had been deliberately misled, wasting precious time and energy chasing nothing. The psychological toll on both sides was immense. For soldiers, Geronimo became a symbol of frustration, a reminder that discipline and resources alone could not guarantee victory. Some began to fear the assignment. Others developed grudging respect for his endurance. A few even admitted that his survival skills rivaled those of elite military scouts. For Geronimo, the pressure never eased. He was constantly responsible not just for himself, but for the people traveling with him, including families, elders, and children. Every decision carried life or death consequences. Every mistake could mean capture, imprisonment, or worse. He was not only running from soldiers, he was running from hunger, from exhaustion, from betrayal, from the slow collapse of the world he had known. Despite the pursuit, Geronimo remained defiant. He refused to disappear quietly. He refused to surrender without conditions. He refused to accept a future where his people lived confined, powerless, and controlled. Newspapers across the country followed the chase. Some exaggerated his actions. Others portrayed him as a villain. But no matter the tone, the message was the same. Geronimo had become a challenge the United States could not ignore. His name began to carry a deep. Many native tribes, he represented resistance. To settlers, he represented fear. To the military, he represented humiliation. To the government, he represented unfinished business. The pursuit crossed international borders, forcing diplomatic negotiations between the United States and Mexico. Soldiers tracked him across mountains, valleys, and remote regions where maps were unreliable and supply lines fragile. Every mile traveled cost more money, more manpower, and more political pressure. And yet, despite all this effort, Geronimo continued to endure. He survived ambushes. He escaped surrender agreements that turned into traps. He adapted to changing conditions faster than the army could update its plans. But time was not on his side. Years of running took their toll. Resources became scarce. His group grew smaller. Fatigue accumulated. The world around him was changing faster than he could outrun it. And slowly, the balance began to shift. Because Geronimo lost his will to fight, but because the pressure of an empire combined with exhaustion, betrayal, and inevitability began closing in. The man who had forced America into its longest manhunt was approaching a moment that would define his legacy forever. Not just as a warrior, not just as a fugitive, but as a symbol of resistance pushed to its final limit. By the time the pursuit reached its final stage, Geronimo was no longer simply being hunted. He was being worn down by time, exhaustion, and the slow collapse of the world he had been fighting to preserve. Years of running had drained resources, weakened his group, and pushed his people to the limits of physical endurance. The land that once offered freedom now offered fewer hiding places, fewer supplies, and fewer paths that could guarantee survival. The United States Army, determined to end the humiliation, intensified the pressure. Troops were stationed across key routes. Scouts monitored water sources. Alliances were leveraged. Negotiations were attempted, broken, and attempted again. Every option narrowed. Every decision became heavier. Geronimo did not surrender because he was afraid to fight. He surrendered because he was responsible for others. His people were hungry. They were exhausted. They were running out of options. In 1886, after years of evading capture, finally laid down his resistance. The surrender marked the end of the longest manhunt in American frontier history. Newspapers framed it as a victory. Politicians celebrated it as proof of control. The military presented it as a final conquest. But Geronimo's story did not end in triumph or defeat. It ended in captivity. Instead of being allowed to return home, he and his people were sent into exile, far from their ancestral lands. They were held as prisoners of war for decades. Geronimo, once the master of open land, movement, and freedom, spent the rest of his life confined by borders, regulations, and systems he had fought against. And yet, even in captivity, he never disappeared. His name continued to spread. His image became famous. His story traveled across America. Geronimo attended public events. He appeared at fairs. He met presidents. He became a living relic of a world that no longer existed, a man who had challenged the expansion of a nation and forced it to recognize his resilience. But fame did not equal freedom. He died in 1909, far from the land he had defended, carrying regret that he had ever surrendered. His final years were not defined by battlefield victory or defeat, but by the quiet pain of knowing he had outlasted the war but not the consequences of it. History often remembers Geronimo as a warrior, but his deeper legacy is more complex. He was not just fighting the United States. He was fighting disappearance. He was fighting erasure. He was fighting for the right to exist on his own terms. The fact that one man could force an empire into its longest manhunt is not just a story of resistance. It is a story of endurance, intelligence, and unbreakable will. Geronimo did not defeat America, but America never truly defeated him either. They captured his body. They restricted his movement, but they never erased his name. If this story changed the way you see the real history of the American frontier, take a moment now. Leave a like to support long-form historical documentaries that tell the full truth. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful true stories about legends, resistance, and the untold side of the Wild West. And comment below, you see Geronimo as a rebel or as one of the greatest resistance leaders in American history. Because in the end, Geronimo was not remembered as the man who surrendered. He was remembered as the man who forced an empire to chase him for years and never broke his spirit.